Good everyone, welcome back to my channel Spark Scholar. So in today's video, we'll be discussing how to find our strong research gap for your thesis or research paper. One of the hardest part of academic research is finding a strong research gap. Many PhD students spend several months reading journal articles, yet they still struggle to know what is actually missing in the literature. The problem is that research gaps are not usually obvious. Most of the time, they are hidden inside patterns, inside contradictions, limitations, and unanswered questions across multiple studies. Students who understand how to identify strong research gaps often write better proposals, produce more original theses, and publish stronger journal papers. So in this video, you will learn you will learn a simple and practical five-step method that can help you identify meaningful research gaps and develop stronger research questions for your study. So the first question you need to answer is, what is a research gap? Right? Although different scholars have defined it in different ways. However, our definition is a research gap is an issue, a problem, or an area that existing studies have not fully explained or solved. It means a problem that is yet unsolved. In simple terms, it is something researchers still do not clearly understand. Research gaps can appear in different ways. Sometimes researchers disagree with each other. Sometimes certain countries, industries, or groups of people have not been studied enough. In other situations, researchers may use weak methods or ignore important theories and perspectives. A strong research gap helps explain sorry definitely a strong research gaps helps explain why a study is important. It mainly bring about what the importantness of what a research. Without a clear gap, your research may look repetitive, weak, or unoriginal. Reviewers and supervisors may begin to ask an important question: what exactly is new in these studies? What is novel about these studies? That is why identify a meaningful research gap is one of the most important part of academic research. Why many researchers struggles to find research gaps? These are some of the reasons. Many students approach literature review the wrong way. They read papers one after another while trying to find missing topics. Unfortunately, research gaps rarely appear directly inside a single paper. Strong research gaps usually appear when you compare many studies together and carefully analyze patterns across the literature. For example, a gap may exist between conflicting findings, repeated limitations, ignored assumptions, or different research environment. This means that finding this means that finding a research gap requires strategic reading, not random reading. The good news is that there is a practical system you can follow. Step 1: understand the research area properly. Yes, step 1 is what? To understand the research area properly. The first step is to understand the overall structure of your research field before searching for gaps. Start by identifying the major ideas and themes in your area. Look for commonly studied variables, dominant theories, frequently used methods, and popular research topics. You can search for these studies using academic databases such as we have Google Scholar, you have Scopus, you have Web of Science. As you continue reading, you will begin to notice patterns. Some areas may already have many studies and strong evidence, while other areas may appear weak or less explored. Those less explored areas may contain potential research gaps. For example, you may discover that many studies discuss digital transformation in large companies, but very few studies focus on small businesses or developing countries that may reveal a contextual research gap. The goal at this stage is to understand where research is already strong and where knowledge is still limited. So step two is what? To identify what researchers already agree on. Before you can identify a research gap, you must first understand what the field already knows. Ask yourself these questions. What findings appear repeatedly in the literature? Which theories are commonly accepted? What conclusions do researchers strongly agree on? These steps helps you avoid selecting problems that have already been solved. For example, many studies may already show that remote work improves flexibility for workers. Simply repeating the same finding may not add much value to literature. So instead, you should focus on unresolved areas such as long-term productivity, leadership challenges, employee mental health, or differences across industries. The strongest research gaps often appear after understanding the established knowledge in the field. Step 3. Look for contradictions in the literature. One of the best ways to identify a strong and publishable research gap is to search for contradictions between studies. Sometimes researchers studying the same topic arrive at completely different conclusions. For example, one study may report that social media improves academic performance, while another study may conclude that social media negatively affects students. These contradictions are important because they show uncertainty in the literature. And where uncertainty exists, research opportunities also exist. Pay attention to phrases like results are mixed, evidence remains limited, further investigation is needed, findings are inconsistent. This statement often point directly toward possible research gaps. Whenever researchers disagree, there is usually room for deeper investigation. Step number 4, identify what is missing. Not all research gaps come from contradictions. Sometimes the gap is simply an absence of research. At this stage, ask yourself important questions. Which countries or populations have not been studied? Which industries are missing? Which theories have not been applied? Which methods are rarely used? This process can reveal highly valuable research opportunities. For example, many studies may discuss artificial intelligence. So as I said, for example, many studies may discuss artificial intelligence adoption in developed countries, but very few studies may focus on developing economies. Similarly, you may notice that most studies really rely heavily on questionnaires, while very few use interviews, experiment, or long-term analysis. These become methodological or contextual gaps. Another smart strategy is to carefully read the limitations and future research sections of journal articles. Researchers often reveal important opportunities for future studies in this section. However, not all journals, not all papers show limitation and recommendation section in their work. Step number 5. Use the gap to shape your research. Confirm that the research gap is important. This is one of the most ignored steps by many researchers. Not every gap is valuable. A strong research gap should be important, relevant, researchable, and useful to the academic field. Ask yourself these questions. Will other researchers care about this issue? Does this study add meaningful knowledge? Can journals publish research on this topic? Does it solve a practical or theoretical problem. Sometimes a topic may technically be a gap but still lack importance. For example, studying a very narrow issue with little real-world relevance may not attract attention from journals, supervisors, or even reviewers. The best research gaps combine three important key things. One, novelty. Two, importance. And three, feasibility. How to write strong research gap statement. After identifying the gap, the next step is explaining it clearly. A strong research gap statement usually contains four simple parts. Four simple parts. One, explain what previous studies already know. Two, describe what is missing or unresolved. Three, explain why the gap is important, the significance of the gap, the impact it's going to make. And finally, explain how your study will address the problem. A simple structure looks like this. Although previous studies have examined X, limited research have explored Y. Within the context of Z, this gap is important because dash. Therefore, this study investigates dash. Using this structure can make your proposal clearer, stronger, and more convincing. Common mistake researchers make. Many students struggle because they confuse research topic with research gaps. Others choose gaps that are too broad or fail to analyze contradiction in the literature carefully. Some researchers only focus on recent studies and ignore older foundational papers that may contain important insight. Another common mistake is reading papers passively instead of analyzing patterns across studies. Also, just because very few studies exist on a topic does not automatically mean it is a strong research gap. Sometimes topics remain unstudied because they are not important, practical, or realistic. Such strong research gaps solve meaningful problems and contribute valuable knowledge. Finding a strong research gap is not about randomly searching for untouched topics. It is about carefully analyzing the literature to discover contradictions, missing perspectives, weak evidence, underexplored areas, and unanswered questions. The best researchers do not simply read papers. What they do is that they analyze patterns across many papers. Once you master this skill, writing research proposals, thesis, and journal articles becomes much easier. A strong research gap is the foundation of strong academic research. And today, researchers can combine their analytical skills with AI tools to make the process faster, smarter, and more effective. So if you found this video helpful, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with other students and researchers. Also, let me know in the comment section, what is the biggest challenge you face when trying to identify a research gap? Your comment may help another researchers who is struggling with the same problem. Bye for now, and don't forget, we are Spark Scholars, from idea to paper. Bye and have a nice day.